LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 13th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up. Thanks for joining me and Chong the cat, who I will put down because he doesn't like to be held this way. This is the penultimate episode of Monday Media Mix-Up. And I want to respond to, I saw just a live comment about this, and I saw some comments on the recorded show last week. It's the second to last episode of Monday Media Mix-Up, but I'm actually not leaving. I should still be making 3 or 4 videos a month, I hope. They'll just mostly be edited videos with like voiceover off camera, and I do plan to stick with the YouTube channel through July 2026, which will be my 20-year anniversary at least. I'm planning on making different kinds of videos, but I'm not leaving. I'm still here, but this will be the second to last episode of my Monday Media Mix-Up, where I pick out the 11 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. This edition of Monday Media Mix-Up is dominated by news about the California wildfires. I'm up here in Northern California, so like hundreds of miles away from the Los Angeles fires, but I actually did grow up in Southern California. In fact, very close to where Trump is in the thumbnail for this video, which was the Trump golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes is very close to where I grew up. It's pretty far from the fires right now, but I do know people who lived in Pacific Palisades. I'm familiar with the area. I'm familiar with California, so I'll use some of that knowledge to talk about this main topic. But the main thing I want to point out about it is how little climate change was discussed on the big 5 corporate outlets. And instead, it looks like Republicans are trying to create this whole misinformation storm about how this is the fault of liberals or California government officials, when really, there'll have to be some investigation as to exactly what happened, but the main culprit here is 100-mile-an-hour hurricane force winds that are definitely the result of the heating up of the planet. Just on Friday, scientists said 2024 was the hottest year on record. And, I've been doing this weekly live stream about the Sunday morning news analysis shows for 12 years. And one of the topics I've talked about many, many times is, what people looking back on these shows 50 years from now, what are they going to say are the most important topics they should have been talking about? And of course, climate change will probably be the top one. And there were like basically 3 mentions, and only 2 shows mentioned climate change, and was barely there, wasn't used to cross-examine any of the politicians. Meanwhile, the Republicans are playing this weird blame game. Here, I took one of many TruthSocial posts from Donald Trump here. You can see fire is spreading rapidly, zero containment. Nobody has ever seen such failed numbers before. Gross incompetence by Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. And Biden's FEMA has no money. All wasted on the Green New Scam. LA is a total wipeout. See, not only are they like not talking about climate change, but they're letting Republicans get away with saying that the climate change is the problem. Like people who claim there is climate change is the problem. And that's like ridiculous. And they're also, promulgating the same thing on Fox News. Here's like a screenshot of America's Newsroom, supposedly straight news program this morning. California liberals ripped over wildfire response failures. Like, why is this a liberal failure that there's this unprecedented firestorm in Los Angeles? Or here you can see how it's framed at the very beginning of Fox News Sunday yesterday. I don't normally show the stuff like before she says hello, Shannon Bream, but this is from like her teaser intro.
Deadly fires rip through Los Angeles, destroying entire neighborhoods.
Everyone has lost everything here.
And fueling criticism on the response by the state's Democratic leaders.
What are you doing at this point to earn back people's trust?
So, and remember, we just elected a guy who's one of his few, like, policies that you can tell what he plans to do is drill, baby, drill. And nobody asked about fossil fuel and how fossil fuels and burning of how it puts carbon in the atmosphere and how it increases the temperature. And none of that came up on any of the Sunday shows. Much more about liberals and like this whole way that the Republicans are framing it. It's got so bad that Gavin Newsom actually had to put up a California fire facts website here. I put a link down to this website in the video description, as well as Trump's TruthSocial post, and you see he like debunks a lot of these Republican talking points on there, and you'll hear a couple of those along the way from Senator John Barrasso and from Vice President-elect JD Vance without any pushback from the corporate media. I mean, I don't know why the corporation, I mean, I think I do know why the corporations don't talk about climate change. I think they have advertisers who don't want them to talk about climate change and the problems with fossil fuels. But you can let me know what you think in the comments section as we get to the 5 news summaries from longest to shortest. The longest one was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Jon Karl was in this week, and he had Matt Rivers talking about the wildfires that are still raging in Los Angeles. Extensive concentration on, the scary pictures, not so much on the facts of climate change. Climate change never came up once in the entire ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos program, which I will talk about a little more after we watch that first news summary together over here.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week. The scope of the wildfires that are still raging in Los Angeles and the destruction they have brought to America's second largest city is almost impossible to comprehend. The images evoking one-word descriptors used to describe the worst disasters: catastrophic, hellscape, apocalyptic. There are so many frightening images, but one in particular caught our attention this morning. You can see here Ariel Hart in a hospital bed with her newborn son, George. Shortly after George was born on Tuesday, Ariel noticed smoke in the distance, the beginning of the Palisades fire. Over the next 36 hours, she watched it grow. She was supposed to stay in the hospital for at least another day, but as the fire closed in, she chose to leave. Ariel and George are safe at home for now, but her husband just lost his childhood home. Just one story among so many. As we come on the air this morning, some 40,000 acres have burned across 6 fires in the Los Angeles area. That's roughly the size of all of Washington, D.C., and twice the size of Manhattan. The most devastating blazes are still burning. The Pacific Palisades fire is just 11% contained, and the Eaton fire is 15% contained. The Palisades fire threatening the neighborhood of Brentwood over the weekend. At least 16 people have been killed in Los Angeles County. That toll could rise as the fires continue to rage. And the economic damage is just starting to be calculated. With thousands of structures damaged or destroyed, experts say the toll could reach more than $150 billion, making these fires among the costliest natural disasters in American history. In a moment, I'll speak with FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell and California Senator Adam Schiff. But we begin with ABC's Matt Rivers on the ground in the Pacific Palisades. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, John. Dramatic scenes across Los Angeles that we saw firsthand. We saw flames coming right up to some homes in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, but firefighters thankfully were able to push those flames back, taking advantage in a lull of some of the high winds that we've seen throughout the last week. But we know those high winds are set to return. This morning, devastating fires continuing to ravage Los Angeles, now threatening more neighborhoods, with residents in Brentwood and Encino the latest to face evacuations. ABC News on the ground, watching as firefighters were able to save a Brentwood neighborhood, spreading out and dousing the canyon hillside with water. So you can see with these wind gusts, those flames trying to force their way up from the bottom of the canyon, and as they do so, they're getting closer and closer to this house here. This is somebody's patio that we're on, and you can see the firefighters doing their best to make sure the flames don't get this high. Without these firefighters here right now, the house here, other houses in this neighborhood, almost certainly gone. A temporary lull in high winds helped the fight Friday into Saturday, but those winds have since picked back up, with severe gusts prompting a red flag warning until Wednesday this week. Some evacuated residents across the city now returning to find their homes and their lives ruined.
Everything burned.
Everything burned. I honestly thought I was going to return. I didn't think the fires were going to come down. No one thought they were going to come down.
There is some good news as firefighters keep battling these flames. Air resources are now able to fly near constantly, dropping water and fire retardant. And the winds, while still high, are not nearly as bad as when the fires first broke out on Tuesday.
By no stretch of the imagination are we out of the woods.
Several obstacles initially prevented firefighters from containing them, including powerful wind gusts that ripped across the city at nearly 100 miles an hour and grounded all firefighting aircraft. Additionally, low water pressure and depleted hydrants hampered their efforts, prompting Governor Gavin Newsom on Friday to call for an independent investigation, saying, "We need answers to ensure this does not happen again, and we have every resource available to fight these catastrophic fires." Meanwhile, tension among some city and state officials boiling over.
My message is the fire department needs to be properly funded. The growth of this city since 1960 has doubled, and we have less fire stations.
Los Angeles Fire Department Chief Kristen Crowley pleading for additional resources.
Since the 3 years that I've been in the seat, I've sounded the alarm to say we need more. This is no longer sustainable.
And John, Mayor Bass responding to all of that at a press conference, saying now that she and the fire chief are in lockstep and they are focused on fighting these fires. Meanwhile, everyone across this area very much focused on what will happen in the next few days. We know that these high winds are set to return. Red flag warnings are in place through at least Wednesday of this week. There's an uneasy calm in Los Angeles right now, John.
Uneasy to be sure. Thank you, Matt. I'm joined now by FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell.
And I will have a clip of Deanne Criswell over on CNN State of the Union coming up, because that is one of only 2 mentions of climate change on all 5 of the programs. And she brought it up when Jake Tapper was asking her a question about insurance companies dropping fire coverage in California, which is a big topic that I'm not really going to cover, although I saw a live comment about that. But I want to move on. Now, like I said, I thought that was that news summary mainly focused on pathos and scary pictures and not as many facts. Like I said, no mention of climate change. I mean, they talked about some of the sniping between state and local officials or between different government officials. It made me realize one of the other causes of the underfunding here of fire departments and public resources in California is Proposition 13. Proposition 13 back from like 1978, I think it was. I think I was in like 7th grade, and I was on a debate team in my 7th grade class. I was on the side against Proposition 13, and I said this would happen. No, I said it would underfund. It would stop the funding of fire departments was one of the things that we talked about way back then. So that's another thing. But and they don't talk about that, of course, in any of these news summaries. That's too much context, I guess. But the CBS News Face the Nation news summary coming up second here is it's 1 second longer than the Meet the Press one, so I guess it comes beforehand. But it also has the is the one news summary in which right at the beginning Margaret Brennan mentions that this is caused by climate change. And that's the last time climate change was mentioned in the entire CBS News Face the Nation program. By the way, down in the video description, under sources, I put links to the source of all my clips, including the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube page, where you can watch the entire Face the Nation episode and check if I'm right. Did they ever mention climate change again? Nope. Just right here at the very beginning. Although kudos to them for actually mentioning climate change and saying it was a cause, but they didn't really go into the whole greenhouse gas thing and all the important facts that people should know about as we have Donald Trump's drill baby drill policy coming into office. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch Margaret Brennan along with their reporter Jonathan Vigliotti on the catastrophic fires in Southern California in this clip.
I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, as we begin what's now day 6 of the catastrophic fires in Southern California. The situation is still extremely volatile and therefore still very dangerous. The death toll stands at 16, with 150,000 residents under evacuation orders. The long-term impact on Californians' health and damage done to the environment are incalculable. The cost to rebuild in California, which boasts the largest economy in America, are impossible to tally at this point. The causes for the individual fires are under investigation, but scientists say there's no question that climate change exacerbated the factors leading to these cataclysmic events. The two big fires, the coastal Palisades fire and the inland Eaton fires, are still raging, and the National Weather Service has cited red flag wind warnings in the Southern California area through at least Wednesday. We begin with the very latest from our Jonathan Vigliotti.
More than 14,000 personnel from all over California, 9 states, as well as Canada and Mexico, have mobilized to the bone-dry hills of Los Angeles, battling 4 active and sprawling wildfires menacing millions of people across the region. The massive Palisades fire, the largest in the city, has grown to nearly 25,000 acres, destroying an estimated 75% of Pacific Palisades. Officials say that 1/3 of the eastern edge of Malibu has been destroyed too. The Palisades fire now threatens nearby Brentwood and Encino, where additional evacuation orders have been issued. A brief break in the wind allowed aircraft to gain 11% containment Saturday as the region was bombarded with water and flame retardant. But planes were briefly grounded after drones were spotted in the airspace. In Altadena, the Eaton fire has destroyed more than 14,000 acres and reduced thousands of homes to ash. That fire is now 27% contained. Officials say the rash of fires have burned through more than 40,000 acres and more than 12,000 structures have been destroyed, a city under siege. LA Mayor Karen Bass is now facing calls to resign from a growing number of people who say the city's response was inadequate.
My question to you is, what explains this lack of preparation and rapid response?
When we are safe, when lives have been saved and homes have been saved, we will absolutely do an evaluation.
Her own fire chief has said budget cuts hampered firefighting efforts.
We are screaming to be properly funded to make sure that our firefighters can do their jobs.
The cause of the fires are still under investigation, and the National Guard is on scene to prevent looting and enforce a nightly curfew.
And red flag warnings are back in effect. Wind gusts could exceed 50 miles per hour. Meanwhile, officials are preemptively cutting power in some neighborhoods to prevent more fires from sparking, Margaret.
Jonathan Vigliotti reporting from Pacific Palisades. Stay safe and thank you. We turn now to FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Welcome back.
And I thought that was also a good news summary there. They did mention scientists say the causes of the fire were exacerbated by climate change. They did talk about the sort of finger pointing going on in Los Angeles and questions being asked without saying, you know, like without doing it the Fox News way. California liberals ripped over wildfire response failures, which is definitely the Fox News narrative that we're seeing over and over again. And I'll get to the Fox News Sunday news summary in just a minute. But first, I want to show you the next longest one. NBC News Meet the Press did a fairly good news summary from the fires. They have their reporter. It's actually, I believe, just Kristen Welker doing the report before they go to Jacob Soboroff, MSNBC reporter, NBC reporter Jacob Soboroff, who actually grew up in Pacific Palisades. But the one thing that NBC News Meet the Press does that the other ones don't really do is threw in the fact that there are a couple other news events over the week, like Trump's going to be inaugurated in a week, and Jimmy Carter's funeral, and Trump was sentenced on 34 felonies. He's like now like officially a convicted felon because his judgment of conviction was entered by the court on Friday. And I guess Trump's happy about the California wildfires, that didn't get bigger coverage. because there's so much other news, and at least Kristen Welker mentioned it over in the NBC News Meet the Press News Summary. I'll talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. The inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president is now just 1 week away. As the country prepares for this historic change in power, we witnessed a rare moment of unity here in Washington when all 5 living presidents came together to mourn the death of the 39th president, Jimmy Carter. But with just days before taking office, even more unprecedented was Friday's criminal sentencing of President-elect Trump in the New York hush money case, making him the first convicted felon to ever serve in the White House. The judge imposing a sentence of unconditional discharge, removing any punishment or jail time or probation. Mr. Trump addressed the court before his sentence was read.
This has been a very terrible experience. I think it's been a tremendous setback for New York and the New York court system.
But the most pressing and immediate issue for the country, the deadly wildfires unfolding in Southern California, prompting President Biden to cancel his final overseas trip as president to manage the federal response to the disaster.
Now I speak for the American people and I say, we owe you, we're with you, and we're going to make sure you get every resource you need.
The wind-driven wildfires in the Los Angeles area have been burning out of control, wiping out entire neighborhoods, displacing hundreds of thousands, leaving billions of dollars in damage, and claiming at least 16 lives.
It is safe to say that the Palisades fire is one of the most destructive natural disasters in the history of Los Angeles.
It looked apocalyptic. Not since the 1990s. When Los Angeles was hit with the fires, the flood, the earthquake, and the riots, have I seen such disaster occur here in our city.
As frustrations grow and the search for answers mounts, the LA fire chief is now blaming budget cuts and city leaders.
Did they fail you? That is our job, and I tell you, that's why I'm here. So let's get us what we need so our firefighters can do their jobs. Did they fail you? Yes. When a firefighter comes up to a hydrant, we expect there's going to be water. We don't control the water supply. Our firefighters are there to protect lives and property and to make sure that we're properly trained and equipped.
While President Biden has pledged to deliver federal aid to California for the next 6 months, some Democrats have expressed fear President-elect Trump might withhold aid when he comes into office, a threat he's made multiple times.
The water coming here is dead. And Gavin Newsom is going to sign those papers. And if he doesn't sign those papers, we won't give him money to put out all his fires. And if we don't give him the money to put out his fires, he's got problems. He's a lousy governor.
Now, this week, Mr. Trump stepped up his attacks on California's Democratic governor, accusing him of failing to bring the fires under control.
I think that Gavin is largely incompetent, and I think the mayor is largely incompetent, and probably both of them are just stone cold incompetent. What they've done is terrible.
On Saturday, Governor Newsom spoke to NBC's Jacob Soboroff in an exclusive interview for Meet the Press from inside the fire zone.
And yeah, I will have a clip of that interview where Governor Newsom talks both about the attacks from Donald Trump and also the situation with the empty fire hydrants and the investigation into that. I mean, there will be an investigation to understand exactly what happened, but the leading theory that I've been seeing that makes the most sense is that the water system is designed to put out the fire for, when a house is on fire or a block is on fire, or maybe, a couple small, couple blocks on fire in the city, but not like this huge conflagration. There's just not enough water, and it's also supposed to be supplemented by air power, and none of the aircraft could fly because the winds were too high. So it was the 100-mile-an-hour winds that made the fire grow so fast, and then the inability of the firefighters to use air power that caused them to lose pressure in the fire hydrants, but also, like I said, down in the video description, there's a link to the Gavin Newsom California Fire Facts page where a lot of these issues are discussed and some of the Republican talking points are debunked. But speaking of, and the one other thing I wanted to say about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary is I think it had the best coverage of like Trump's attacks. It even had that news conference he gave from the Trump golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes that I used for the thumbnail of my video here. And that's like right near where I grew up. That's like close to where I went to high school and where Marineland was before they closed down Marineland. And yeah, so that's like the lands of my youth. So I appreciate NBC News Meet the Press taking a clip of Trump in Palos Verdes. And now, speaking of Republican talking points, I am going to move on to the Fox News Sunday news summary, where one of the weird things they did is they seem to have this like obsession with there are also winter storms in winter. That was like one of their breaking news stories last week, which I don't know, it's sort of borderline news, and they like Shannon Bream starts with that, I think maybe because it's snow in the South, which is a little bit newsworthy, and also that's like where their real viewers are, not like the liberals out in California. It's like they're feeling they're almost ashamed they have to cover like bad things happening to liberals in California, so they have to like tack on the bad winter weather in the South first, and then Griff Jenkins, I think, does a little bit of biased reporting that I'll talk about after we watch that third news summary together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin with those disasters across the country. Much of the South digging out after a major winter snowstorm. Millions of Americans dealing with frigid temperatures today in the aftermath, and thousands of flights being impacted by the storm in the Southeast and major airline hubs like Atlanta and Charlotte. While out west, the death toll has climbed to at least 16 people because of those devastating wildfires in Los Angeles. Thousands of homes and businesses have just been simply reduced to ashes. Firefighters are dealing with major increases in wind gusts today, 30 to 50 miles per hour in coastal areas and up to 70 miles an hour in the mountains. In a moment, we'll talk with FEMA Director Deanne Criswell about the federal response to the disaster. But first, we turn to Griff Jenkins, who is there on the ground in Los Angeles. Hello, Griff.
Good morning, Shannon. Street by street, block by block, apocalyptic scenes like the one behind me of homes and buildings charred and decimated as that death toll rises to 16. More than 100,000 Los Angelinos evacuated from their homes. The Palisade fire at this hour, 11% contained, more than 23,000 acres destroyed. To give you perspective, that's more than 25 times the size of New York's Grand Central Park. The other fire they're battling, the Eaton fire, 15% contained, more than 14,000 acres destroyed. Yesterday, LA's Mayor Karen Bass giving an update saying now is not the time for pointing fingers.
We need to stay focused, but I will say that when the fires are out, make no mistake, we will have a full accounting of what worked and especially what did not.
And Shannon, lives have been shattered. The emotional component. This building here was a preschool lined with tiles that the children had painted. Parents were out here, a couple, John and Cameron Dale, digging through the rubble, trying to find a memento of their children's artwork to hold on to. Here's what they told us. Listen.
All of my girlfriends, the one thing we said we wish we grabbed, which no one thought this would happen, and we just were in a rush to get out, all of our children's artwork. This is the only, this is it. Like, this is it. We have nothing. So finding all of my friends, and like each one you find, it's just like a treasure because we have nothing of their childhood artwork left.
And Shannon, there are others outside these areas that have been cordoned off by National Guard, law enforcement, that want to get in to find out what remains of their homes and their memories. It comes as these winds are starting to pick back up, as you mentioned. We'll see where this firefighting goes today, but they are all hands on deck 24/7. We expect in a few hours a press update from LA's Mayor Karen Bass.
Shannon?
All right, we know you're working around the clock with our teams there to keep us updated. Griff Jenkins, thank you very much. Joining us now, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell.
So actually, that wasn't that bad a report from Fox News in terms of bias. I mean, Griff Jenkins did, in his report, talk about how Karen Bass was saying it's not the time to point blame and kind of like associated Karen Bass with blame. Didn't really talk about the Trump attacks that you saw covered on NBC News Meet the Press. Certainly didn't talk about climate change, but only CBS News Face the Nation talked about climate change in their news summaries. Certainly didn't talk about Trump being convicted of felonies, although Fox News Sunday did do a segment on that later, but all with people who said, shouldn't have happened, it'll be overturned and whatever. I don't want to go into all that, but I do want to finish up the news summaries with CNN State of the Union. Unfortunately, did not mention climate change, but here's how Jake Tapper did the 1-minute intro to the show yesterday over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is praying that the winds stay low enough to allow firefighters to contain and then extinguish those blazes burning through Los Angeles County. But after a productive night of fighting those fires this morning, sadly, emergency workers are again preparing for a return of those huge wind gusts that on Saturday propelled the Palisades fire farther inland, threatening the 405, a major freeway, the Getty Center, the campus of UCLA. At least 16 people have died in these fires. Conditions are still dangerous, of course, to know the true death toll. As amidst questions of arson, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms takes the lead in determining the fire's origin and cause. More than 150,000 Angelinos are still under evacuation orders. They're unsure when they can return to their homes or if they will even have homes when they drive back through the scorched Southern California streets. And no one is sure what comes next. And joining us now, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell.
And I am now going to show you a clip of FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, the clip from CNN State of the Union, because it's the only other place other than the beginning of the CBS News Face the Nation news summary that somebody mentioned climate change. And it wasn't one of the anchors asking a question of one of these Republicans I'm going to show you. No one asked Republicans about, do you think maybe we should hold off on that drill, baby drill, if it's causing like 100-mile-an-hour fire hurricanes in Los Angeles? And that's just the beginning, or, that's the question I would have liked to seen someone ask. But no, it wasn't in a question from an anchor. It was actually the FEMA administrator who brought up climate change when Jake Tapper asked her about insurance companies dropping Californians from their policies. And then Jake Tapper, I don't know, maybe he had planned to ask something about climate change, because he does have a follow-up question about climate change that seems semi-prepared. So maybe we can give him the benefit of the doubt on that. I don't know. You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together over here.
A lot of Californians had their insurance canceled by private insurance companies, fire insurance. The industry in California was already in crisis before the fires. How worried are you that insurance providers are going to choose to flee California, as we've seen in other disaster-prone states such as Florida, and that California taxpayers and actually American taxpayers are going to end up footing the bill here?
I'm always concerned about the fact that many of the insurance carriers are pulling out of the markets. These types of catastrophic risks, these fire risks, they are increasing. We're seeing the change coming from climate change, and we're seeing more significant severe weather events. That's what we're seeing here in California. Without insurance, people are not going to have the tools and the resources to help rebuild their lives. FEMA's programs can help jumpstart that recovery, but they're not there to rebuild their home. And so without insurance, we're going to have to bring in philanthropy. We're going to have to bring in our nonprofits. The Small Business Administration is going to have a critical role in helping these communities recover. But it's going to take all of us, if they don't have the insurance, to be able to help them rebuild.
You just touched on something we're hearing from a lot of survivors of these fires, which is this idea that this is just the new world we're living in due to the climate crisis, extreme heats, prolonged droughts, hurricane force Santa Ana winds. All of that created the tinderbox fueling this catastrophe. Does the scale of devastation in Los Angeles indicate that we as a country are just simply not prepared for the realities of the climate crisis?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at what these new weather events are bringing, the severity that they're bringing, and think about what the future risk is going to continue to be. And as we have these tragedies, we also need to make sure that we're taking this as an opportunity to rebuild these communities in a way that's going to make them more resilient against these types of disasters. I talked about this all last year. FEMA had a year of resilience in trying to get people to understand what is it we do to protect these communities and reduce the impact. There are things that we can do, and those are the steps we're going to have to take to make sure that they don't have as much impact as we're seeing right now from these fires.
So that's it. That is the whole discussion of climate change from all 5 shows, except for the brief mention of scientists say that that climate change is fueling these conditions at the beginning of the CBS News Face the Nation news summary. So why was there so little discussion of climate change? I don't know. I'm about to show you 4 newsmaker clips, 4 interviews. Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Adam Schiff, Senator John Barrasso, and Vice President-elect JD Vance, none of whom were asked one word about climate change and how, especially the Republicans, how the Trump policies on increased drilling is going to affect the disasters that are caused by climate change, as I was saying before I showed the clip. But on the politicization of the fires in California and the Trump attacks on Gavin Newsom, that's something that Jacob Soboroff did ask in the NBC News Meet the Press interview, and I'll show you that clip over here.
President-elect Trump has blamed you for this crisis. He called you incompetent. What's your response?
Well, I called for him to come out, take a look for himself. We want to do it in the spirit of an open hand, not a closed fist. He's the president-elect. I respect the office. We have a president of the United States that within 36 hours provided a major disaster declaration over a text. We had support from the president of the United States, Joe Biden, with 100% reimbursement, all the resources you could hope for or imagine. Constant communication. I'd like to extend that to the president-elect. I don't know what he's referring to when he talks about the Delta smelt in reservoirs. The reservoirs are completely full, the state reservoirs here in Southern California. That mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us. Responding to Donald Trump's insults, we would spend another month. I'm very familiar with them. Every elected official that he disagrees with, very familiar with them.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation to understand what was happening with that local reservoir. That was not a state system reservoir, which the president-elect was referring to as it relates to the Delta and somehow connecting the Delta smelt to this fire, which is inexcusable because it's inaccurate, also incomprehensible to anyone that understands water policy in the state.
My understanding is that you have put a call into President-elect Trump. Has he called you back?
No, that was months ago. That was after his victory. So I look forward to him again coming out here in the spirit of
forgive me for interrupting you, but you did invite him to come out here. Have you had any response?
No.
Nothing. Multiple times, Mr. Trump has threatened to withhold aid for California wildfires, both as president and now again as president-elect. Are you worried that he might actually do that?
Well, I mean, he's done it to Utah, he's done it to Michigan, did it to Puerto Rico. He did it to California back before I was even governor in 2018, until he found out folks in Orange County voted for him, and then he decided to give the money. So he's been at this for years and years and years. It transcends states, including, by the way, Georgia. He threatened similarly. So that's his style. And you know, we take it seriously to the extent that in the past it's taken a little bit more time. I've been pretty expressive about that in the context of someone threatening our first responders in terms of supporting the immediacy of their needs.
That's what you take it as, that President-elect Trump is threatening the first responders here.
Well, I mean, it's what he said. He said, I'm not going to support the firefighting efforts. I'm not going to support the state of California as it relates to its emergency management. He made this pretty clear during the election, unless they do my bidding. And again, these are familiar terms, and they're familiar to a lot of other states, not just my state, and they're familiar to not just me as governor, but the previous governor of California, Governor Brown, that was battling with these same things. So you just work through these things, and I'm just blessed. I mean this. I'm blessed I have 40 million Americans that happen to live in California, that Joe Biden's president of the United States and did what he did immediately. And to the extent that we can work with the same relationship and that same spirit with Donald Trump, I hope we can.
The last
So, yeah, I thought that was a good answer from Gavin Newsom. And as I said earlier, Gavin Newsom even put up this website, California Fire Facts, down in the video description under sources. I put a link to that page. It talks all about the reservoirs and whether they were full, and several other myths that have been floated by, or disinformation or misinformation that Republicans have been putting out there, including some of the things you're going to hear from Senator John Barrasso and Vice President-elect JD Vance in the clip after next and the clip after that. But first I wanted to show Senator Adam Schiff, who was just sworn in as senator in the last week, and or in the last 11 days, I guess. And he is responding to the Trump attacks on California, and also this whole empty fire hydrant issue that, as I said, if you want to see what Gavin Newsom said about empty reservoirs and empty fire hydrants and budget cuts, you can just go to this California Fire Facts webpage and debunk a lot of the stuff you hear on Fox News. But here's Adam Schiff talking about the hydrants and also the Trump attacks over here.
The governor has ordered that investigation into the water. Clearly, that was a factor here. What, in your talk with first responders, with local officials, what's your understanding? Why did so many of those fire hydrants simply run dry? Was there something to do with that 117 million gallon reservoir in the Palisades that was out of operation? What's your understanding? What's your initial read on this?
Well, my initial take, and I certainly want a full review of this so that I can form a more complete understanding of the matter. But my initial understanding is the reservoirs that the Palisades were drawing on, these 3 million gallon reservoirs, were full at the initiation of these fires. But they're intended, frankly, they have the capacity to put out homes that maybe house multiple houses, not if the whole town is up in flames, and most particularly not if the winds are so strong that aircraft can't fly. And this was the problem in the very beginning. The winds were hurricane force, up to 100 miles an hour winds. You can't fly in that, and you depend on being able to do water drops to put down those kind of flames. And I have to think there are probably hundreds of towns in California, thousands and thousands across the country that are in equally the same position, that if they had 100-mile-an-hour winds and a lot of dry fuel, they wouldn't have any more water than this community did. We also had the problem that pipes were melting. And so you had houses burning down, the pipes in those houses melting, water coming out of those pipes, reducing pressure. I think this was an issue in the Altadena fire. And so we're going to have to get to the bottom of this.
And let me ask you,
frankly, a lot of other things.
We're really at time. We have to let you go, but very quickly, how important is it for incoming President Donald Trump and Governor Gavin Newsom to be able to work on this? There's been a lot of really heated rhetoric between those two, of course, especially coming from President-elect Trump. How important is it for them to work together on this?
Look, it's going to be really important for the incoming president to work with all of us in California to make sure that we get the resources we need to put out these flames, if there are any still burning when he takes office, to get the relief to get back on our feet. And I'll tell you this, Jonathan, I've been in Congress a long time approving aid after disasters. I never once even considered, is this hurricane hitting a red state or a blue state? What about this flood? What about this fire? It has never mattered to me.
For sure.
We're all in this together. It's the United States of America. We need the incoming president to view it that way. We're ready to work with the president to make sure that we have no gap, no air between us when it comes to making sure that we help victims get back on their feet and help California rebuild.
All right, Senator Schiff, thank you very much.
So yeah, that was kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that, basically the same thing you heard Adam Schiff say, as that maybe there were mistakes, there should be investigation, but there are some reasonable explanations for water pressure problems, both in terms of the fire being so widespread and melting of the pipes and what actually happened. Hopefully, after the fires are out, that can be investigated, and then you can start maybe considering what the consequences for the bad policies are, but also taking into account the bad climate change policies that also contributed to this whole catastrophe. And you'll see here in this next clip, Senator John Barrasso, Margaret Brennan has him on for an interview, asks him about whether there'll be an aid package, lets him get away with like blaming liberal California policies for the fire without any real evidence, saying things, some of which are debunked over on Gavin Newsom's California Firefax website, doesn't really get pushback from Margaret Brennan, and Margaret Brennan doesn't bring up climate change and how Republican policies on climate change could have exacerbated this fire, even though CBS News Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan at the very beginning of the program mentioned climate change. Scientists saying climate change was a cause, never brought it up again in the whole program, not even when talking to the number 2 Republican in the Senate, John Barrasso, over in this clip.
It's a busy week ahead in the Senate, but before I get to that business, I do want to ask you about these fires in California. Do you expect that Congress will have to provide an additional aid package, and if so, when?
Well, what we're seeing is heartbreaking. It's horrible, affecting people, old and young, rich and poor. Everyone in the Wyoming National Guard is there on the scene, helping with manpower as well as equipment. When you see what's being shown on television, in addition to the tragedy on the ground, you're also seeing gross mismanagement in California by elected officials. And it's heartbreaking to hear the fire chief say that they've diverted all of this money away from the fire department to be used for social programs when they were already stretched too thin. So, yes, I expect there's going to be hearings. There's going to be requests of Congress. There can't be a blank check on this, however, because people want to make sure that as rebuilding occurs, as things go on in California, they have to be resilient so that these sorts of things can't happen again. And the policies of the liberal administration out there, I believe, have made these fires worse.
Do you expect, though, that Congress and Republicans will still help these Americans in need, even if they don't like their local politics and the party?
I expect that there will be strings attached to money that is ultimately approved, and it has to do with being ready the next time, because this was a gross failure this time.
Senator, let me move on to what's happening this week, because you are the whip, you are the vote counter, you are watching very closely.
So yeah, I kept that playing so you can see no follow-up question from Margaret Brennan. What liberal policies caused this? How are you so sure this was caused by liberal policies? What about climate change? Should we look into how climate change causes? No, and that's the worst part about letting the Republicans get away with this framing of this as the result of liberal policies. Maybe there were some mistakes. You would have to wait to have facts to back that up. But a lot of the stuff they're saying now is, like I said, already debunked by Gavin Newsom, not facts. They're misinformation. But once you allow that to be the framing, then they're going to say that California can't get rebuilding aid, after California, gives a lot more tax money to Washington, D.C. than it gets back in benefits. So after paying into the system all these years, California's not going to get rebuilding aid until they change what liberal policies. He seemed to be talking about like DEI or something, or social program. What are Republicans in Congress going to condition this aid on for California when they don't even know what caused the fires to be so bad? And most of the evidence looks like it's drill, baby, drill is the problem, not liberal social policies in California. But anyway, that was not much cross-examination by Margaret Brennan, despite having brought up climate change at the beginning of the program. And then the final newsmaker clip here is Vice President-elect JD Vance, who's asked by Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday about Gavin Newsom inviting Trump to California and, claiming to be attacked by Trump. And JD Vance goes through and says a lot of these same things you just heard from John Barrasso, the Republican talking points, blaming liberal policies. I think if you go to the Gavin Newsom California Fire Facts page, there's actually one sentence or one paragraph that specifically mentions JD Vance and Donald Trump as spreading misinformation that you're about to hear in the final newsmaker clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about the fire situation in California because your administration will be coming in, taking over the reins as the feds are trying to meet that along with many other emergency situations they have going on. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has written to President Trump saying, let's not be divisive right now. Come out and visit. Let people see us working together. Any indication the president-elect may do that?
Well, I know the president would love to visit California. And first of all, our hearts go out to everybody who's been affected by the storms. I've seen some of these videos of people where, folks have lived in those homes for 25, 30, 35 years and everything is gone. And whatever your political affiliation, it's hard not to see those images and just be heartbroken for our fellow Americans who are going through a very tough time. And I do think, frankly, the federal government has to do a better job. President Trump is committed to doing a better job when it comes to disaster relief. That's true for the hurricane victims and flood victims in North Carolina. It's true for the fire victims in California. We have to do a better job. We need competent, good governance. Now, that doesn't mean you can't criticize the governor of California for, I think, some very bad decisions over a very long period of time. I mean, some of these reservoirs have been dry for 15, 20 years. The fire hydrants are being reported as going dry while the firefighters are trying to put out these fires. There is a serious lack of competent governance in California, and I think it's part of the reason why these fires have gotten so bad. We need to do a better job at both the state and federal level.
So there are skeptics who worry about what the administration will do when it comes to handing out aid to California. They're citing back to something that the president-elect said in September when he said, we won't give him money to put out all his fires. And if we don't give him the money to put out his fires, he's got problems. Is there any consideration of withholding aid to Californians?
No, look, President Trump cares about all Americans, right? He is the president for all Americans. And I think that he intends to have FEMA and other federal responses much, much better and much more clued into what's going on there on the ground. President Biden has been asleep at the wheel for a number of different crises. And I think this final California fire, as it's really getting out of control in Biden's last week and a half, I do think it drives home just, again, we've had incompetent governance for so long. President Trump often says that the coalition that made him the president was just a common sense coalition. There were conservatives, there were moderates, there were even a few liberals. But the thing that united us is just this basic idea that, yes, government should be smaller, but when government does the things that it should do, it ought to do them well. And that's one of the things that President Trump and I are going to fight to get back to.
So President Biden is doing what he can on his way out the door on a number of issues.
So, yeah, no follow-up from Shannon Bream, of course, on the reservoirs empty for 15 or 20 years. That's actually one of the pieces of misinformation that is debunked on the California Fire Facts website from Gavin Newsom. I put a link down under sources in the video description if you want to see him specifically debunk that piece of misinformation that, of course, Shannon Bream did not try to ask him about in any way. No mention of climate change. Let him get away with saying this is all the result of bad government and government needs to work, like Trump ever made government work. Well, I mean, he did get the vaccine, but that's like the one thing he won't talk about. But anyway, I think I've proven my point that is in the title of the video this week, that Trump and, of course, other Republicans are attacking liberals about liberal whatever policies, that DEI you heard there, or water policies, forest management, budget cuts, or who knows what it is that they don't even really specify, but somehow something like that is responsible when it's really the climate change crisis that is getting worse and worse because of our continual pumping of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, primarily through the use of fossil fuels. And anyway, that was the premise of the penultimate Monday Media Mix-Up. I'll be back next Monday, and I had hoped this week to make a video explaining the new things I'm going to be doing on my channel after next Monday, the 3 to 4 videos a month I'll be making and what those videos will be about. But I'm not leaving. I'm going to be staying for at least a couple more years. But I do also want to finish up the program with my bonus Cheech and Chong the Kittens clip. This is a clip I took earlier today. We get a lot of their pet needs taken care of through this online website, Chewy. I think a lot of people use Chewy for pet supplies. Well, sometimes when the Chewy boxes come, they like to investigate, and that's the subject of the bonus Cheech and Chong clip to end the show with today over here. So yeah, that is the bonus Cheech and Chong clip. I'll be back next Monday for the final episode of Monday Media Mix-Up, and hopefully I'll also have a video up before then explaining the new things you can look forward to on my channel, 3 to 4 videos a month for the next couple years, just not the regular Monday Media Mix-Up after next Monday. But until I upload that video, or until I see you on my live stream next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.